The laughter in the ballroom sounded rehearsed, polished, hollow, expensive. Ava Carter stood just inside the marble archway of Chicago's Lexington Hotel, a silver tray trembling slightly in her grip. Every chandelier sparkled like it was watching her, and every guest looked like someone who could buy her entire life and not notice. Keep your head down, don't make eye contact, and for God's sake, don't talk to the cavalleros, her manager had warned her in the kitchen. One wrong word, Ava, and you're gone. They make people disappear. She'd laughed when he said it, but now, standing here, surrounded by suits sharper than switchblades and women wrapped in diamonds the size of tears, it didn't sound so funny anymore. The event was the biggest Chicago had seen that season, a private birthday gala for Don Enzo Cavallaro, patriarch of the city's most feared and quietly respected family. Behind their chain of luxury hotels and shipping companies, everyone knew the Cavalleros were something else entirely. Ava adjusted the cuffs of her crisp white shirt, her dark skin catching the warm golden glow of the chandeliers. She looked composed on the outside, but her hands betrayed her, trembling just enough to make the champagne flutes clink against each other. She wasn't supposed to be here. A last-minute call from the catering agency. Double pay for one night's work. That was all it took. Rent was late. Her grandmother's medical bills were getting uglier, and sometimes survival came before sense. She just needed to get through the night unseen. That was all. But life had a cruel sense of humor. Halfway across the ballroom, the string quartet softened their tune. The crowd shifted. The air seemed to hush as an older man entered through the double doors, leaning on a polished silver cane. That was him, Don Enzo Cavallaro, the man whose name could quiet a room and make a judge forget what he'd seen. The crowd parted like the Red Sea as he walked, and Ava instinctively turned to the side, lowering her gaze. But fate has a funny way of finding you when you least need attention. He stopped, right in front of her. He said something in rapid, lyrical Italian, words Ava hadn't heard since she was a little girl in her grandmother's kitchen. She blinked, startled, her mind reaching through time, and before she could stop herself, she answered, softly, fluently, in perfect Sicilian dialect. The room went still. Music died. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Every sound in the ballroom seemed to disappear into the silence that followed. The Don's gray eyes sharpened with surprise. "You speak the old tongue?" he asked in English, voice deep, deliberate, heavy with power. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. "A little, sir. My grandmother taught me." Before he could say more, another figure appeared beside him, tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, with eyes as unreadable as a winter lake. Adrian Cavallaro, the son, the heir, the man people whispered about like a ghost who walked in daylight. "Is there a problem, father?" he asked, his voice low and even. The Don didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled, faint, thoughtful, and said something in Sicilian. Ava caught only fragments, but the tone made her chest tighten, words like perfectly spoken, and one of ours. Adrian's gaze flicked to her, curious, cautious. "My father would like you to join our table," he said. Ava blinked. "Sir, I can't. I'm just serving drinks." He didn't smile. He didn't ask again. He simply took the tray from her hands and passed it to another waiter. "You're not serving anymore." Every instinct screamed no, but she found herself moving, guided gently but firmly toward the head table. Her manager's panicked expression caught her eye across the room. That desperate throat-slash gesture meaning, "Stop. Stop now." But refusing wasn't an option. The Don gestured for her to sit beside him. Adrian took the chair on her other side, trapping her between power and danger. "What's your name, child?" the Don asked kindly. "Ava Carter," she replied, careful to keep her voice steady. He nodded. "Carter. That is not Sicilian." "But your tongue," he smiled faintly, "your tongue belongs to my homeland." "It belonged to my grandmother," Ava said. "She used to speak the dialect when she cooked. Said the food didn't taste right without it." Adrian's eyes flickered, something unreadable passing across them. His father's face changed too, like he'd heard a ghost whisper his name. "And your grandmother's name?" the Don asked quietly. "Celeste Ferraro," Ava said. That was the moment the air left the room. Adrian's fingers tightened around his glass. The Don's expression darkened with something deeper than shock. Recognition. Memory. Maybe even guilt. He whispered the name again, this time in Sicilian. Ferraro! Around them, the table had gone utterly still. Ava had no idea what she'd just said, or why the name Ferraro made the Don look like he'd seen the past walk back into his ballroom. All she knew was that every step of her careful, invisible life had just led her straight into something ancient, something dangerous, something she could never walk away from. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet thought whispered through her panic. Isn't it strange how one innocent word can change your whole life? Because sometimes, it's not the loudest moments that alter your story. It's the quiet ones, the ones that seem harmless until everything shifts. Have you ever said something small, a word, a truth, a mistake, that you didn't realize would change everything? If you have, tell me in the comments what it taught you. Because for Ava, that one sentence was about to rewrite her entire fate. Ava's grandmother used to say, "Some names don't just tell stories, they wake ghosts." And tonight, Ava Carter had accidentally called one back to life. The moment she said Ferraro, the energy in the Cavallaro ballroom changed. Conversation resumed in uneasy fragments, laughter that sounded forced, champagne glasses raised with hands that trembled just slightly. But at the head table, no one was pretending. Don Enzo leaned toward her, his expression unreadable, eyes sharp enough to slice glass. "Your grandmother, Celeste Ferraro. You are certain of that?" Ava nodded, confusion thick in her throat. "Yes, sir. She raised me after my parents died. She's the only family I have." The Don exchanged a look with his son, a wordless, loaded exchange. Adrian's jaw tightened, the muscle near his temple flickering once before he masked it behind calm control. "Ferraro," the Don murmured again, as if tasting a forgotten word. "My brother once spoke that name with reverence." Ava tried to smile politely, though her pulse was thundering in her ears. "It's a common name, I think." The Don's chuckle was soft but humorless. "Not that one." He reached for his wine, his weathered fingers adorned with a ring that glinted like old blood under the chandelier light. "Not in Palermo. Not to us." Before Ava could ask what he meant, Adrian spoke, his voice smooth, low, yet commanding. "Father." That single word silenced the Don. Adrian turned to her, his gaze direct but oddly gentle. "You must be exhausted. My father's curiosity can wait until morning. You've had quite a night." It was both a kindness and an order. The Don's brows rose, amused, but he nodded. "Of course. Let the girl rest. But tomorrow, we will talk." Tomorrow. The word lingered in Ava's mind like a promise she didn't understand. She expected Adrian to hand her off to a security guard or staff member, someone to quietly escort her out. But instead, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and motioned for her to follow. Every step through that marble hall felt surreal. The weight of whispered conversations behind her, the flash of curious eyes tracking her path. She wasn't a server anymore. She was a curiosity, a risk, maybe even a threat. In the corridor beyond the ballroom, the air was cooler, quieter. The music faded to a murmur behind closed doors. Adrian stopped by a large window overlooking the Chicago skyline, the city glittering below like a bed of diamonds resting on shadows. "Celeste Ferraro," he repeated softly, more to himself than to her. "That name has weight in my family. My father will want answers." Ava folded her arms defensively. "I don't have any. My grandmother's from Sicily, but she left before I was born. She taught me a few words, a few recipes. That's all." Adrian's eyes lifted to hers. "And yet, you speak the dialect fluently, accent perfect, tone pure. That's not a few words." Ava met his stare. "I listen. I remember. Is that a crime?" For a heartbeat, his lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement. "Not a crime. But in my world, knowledge can be dangerous." Something in the way he said "my world" made her stomach tighten. He wasn't threatening her, not exactly. It was more of a warning. And yet, when he looked at her, there was something else there too. Curiosity, caution, maybe even respect. Go home, he said finally. Sleep. If anyone from my staff contacts you tomorrow, don't ignore it. Understand? She nodded, though the uncertainty in his tone made her uneasy. As he turned to leave, Ava couldn't stop herself. Why does my grandmother's name matter to you? He paused, hand on the doorframe, his reflection caught in the glass. Sharp suit, darker eyes. Because, he said quietly, that name almost destroyed my family once. Then he was gone. Outside, the cold hit her like a slap. Chicago's night wind had no mercy, cutting through her thin uniform as she waited for the last bus. The streets around the Lexington Hotel were empty, eerily clean, like danger didn't dare linger near the Cavallaros' front door. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, watching her breath curl into the air. The words almost destroyed my family replayed again and again. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew she'd seen something in Adrian's eyes that didn't match the stories people told about him. Something tired, something human. Maybe that was foolish to think. Maybe it was dangerous. But part of her wondered if monsters could get lonely too. When she finally got home to her tiny apartment, the city was silent, except for the hum of traffic below. She leaned against the door, letting the exhaustion crash over her. Her phone buzzed. A message from her manager. You're off tomorrow. Permanently. Don't ask questions. Don't come back. Ava stared at the screen, her heart sinking. One night, one slip of the tongue, and she was out of a job. She laughed bitterly, sinking onto the couch beside the stack of unpaid bills. One word, Grandma, she whispered. One word, and I'm cursed. Her grandmother's voice echoed in memory, soft, wise, tinged with humor. Cursed? No, my sweet girl, the truth doesn't curse you, it calls you. Ava didn't understand what that meant, not yet. But she could feel something shifting in her chest, a pull she couldn't name. The next morning, the knock came, 3 sharp taps, confident, final. Ava opened the door and froze. A man in a tailored black suit stood there, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Miss Carter, he said in a thick accent. Mr. Cavallaro requests your presence. Her stomach dropped. Right now? He didn't answer. He just stepped aside, motioning toward a sleek black sedan waiting at the curb. Ava hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorknob. She should refuse. She should close the door and forget last night ever happened. But something deep inside whispered, you can't unknow what you know. And maybe she didn't want to. She grabbed her coat. The car ride was silent except for the city outside. Cold sunlight breaking over gray buildings, steam rising from manholes. Ava's reflection in the tinted window looked like someone else entirely. A woman on the edge of something too big, too dangerous. When they reached the Cavallaro estate, an ivy-draped mansion set behind stone walls on the city's north side, her breath caught. It didn't look like the home of criminals. It looked like a museum of forgotten power. Inside, she was led through hallways lined with oil paintings, old Italian furniture, and the faint scent of cigar smoke and leather. Then, the doors opened to a private study, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Adrian was waiting. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with faint scars that made him seem more real, more dangerous, more alive. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure I had a choice, she replied. He smiled slightly. You didn't. Ava sat across from him, and for the first time he looked at her not as an intruder, but as something far more complicated. My father believes your appearance last night wasn't coincidence, Adrian said, his voice soft but deliberate. He thinks fate is reminding us of something we buried decades ago. Ava frowned. And what do you think? He studied her for a long moment before answering. I think fate is a story people tell themselves when they're too afraid to admit they want something. She didn't know it yet. But that morning was the last time her life would ever feel ordinary. The past she'd been taught to forget had just woken up, and it was calling her by name. Sometimes the past doesn't knock. It just walks in and sits down at your table, asking questions you're not ready to answer. If the past ever came back for you, would you face it or pretend not to hear it? Tell me in the comments, because for Ava, The answer was about to cost her everything. The room was too quiet. The ticking clock on the far wall seemed louder than it should have been. Each second a small hammer tapping away at the life Ava thought she understood. Adrian Cavallaro leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin as he watched her, not staring, studying, like a man trying to solve a puzzle that didn't belong to him. "I told you," Ava said carefully. "I don't know why my grandmother's name means anything to your family." Adrian's expression didn't change. "You will," he replied, voice soft but certain. "But first, you need to understand something about who we are." Ava let out a nervous laugh. "Everyone in Chicago already knows who you are." Adrian tilted his head slightly. "Do they? Or do they just know the stories?" He stood and crossed the room to an antique cabinet. From it, he drew a weathered folder bound in cracked leather. When he set it down before her, the gold initials stamped on the front made her breath catch. "FF. Ferraro family," her voice trembled. "That's my grandmother's maiden name." He nodded slowly. "I know, because my grandfather once planned to marry a Ferraro." Ava's head snapped up. "What?" Adrian's gaze held hers, steady, unblinking. "Before the war, the Ferraros and the Cavallaros were bound by business and blood. My grandfather's younger brother was engaged to a woman named Elisabetta Ferraro. They were to unite the families, but the war separated them. He never came back, and she left Sicily with an American soldier." He paused, letting that sink in. "My father believes your grandmother's name, Celeste Ferraro, isn't a coincidence. He believes she's that woman's child." Ava's mind reeled. "That's impossible. My grandmother would have told me." Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. "Maybe she wanted to protect you." He opened the folder, revealing sepia photographs, a young woman with dark curls and eyes so familiar they made Ava's chest ache. Her grandmother's face, decades younger, standing beside a man in uniform. Ava swallowed hard. "That can't be real." "It's real," Adrian said quietly. "She left everything behind. Power, land, alliances. My father has spent years wondering what became of the Ferraro bloodline. And last night, when you spoke the old dialect so perfectly, he finally had his answer." Ava leaned back, stunned. "So what now? You drag me into your world because of something that happened before I was born?" He didn't flinch at her anger. "Because it still matters," he said evenly. "There are families who never forgot that broken oath. People who would use you as leverage." Ava blinked, trying to process. "Leverage? I'm a waitress, not a bargaining chip." Adrian walked closer, his presence like gravity pulling her in. "You're more than that now. Your existence changes the balance of power in this city, whether you like it or not." He stopped just in front of her, lowering his voice. "And someone already knows who you are." Her pulse jumped. "What do you mean?" He turned the folder around. Inside was a printed photo, grainy, black and white. Surveillance still. Ava's image, carrying a tray in the ballroom last night. Below it, scrawled in red marker, were 3 words that chilled her to the bone. "Ferraro blood confirmed." Ava's voice came out a whisper. "Who did this?" "The Rizzi family," Adrian said. "Our rivals. They've been watching us for months, waiting for a weakness. And now they think they've found one. You." Her stomach twisted. "You're saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying," he replied quietly, "you already were." Before she could speak, the door burst open. A guard rushed in, breathless, earpiece crackling. "Mr. Cavallaro! We have a situation!" Adrian's entire demeanor changed. Calm gave way to ice. "Speak." "Unidentified car circling the property. Same license plates tied to Rizzi Associates." Ava's heart lurched. "They followed me here?" Adrian turned to her, his tone clipped. "Do you have anyone at home? Family? Friends who might be alone?" "My grandmother," Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "She's in a care facility across town." Adrian was already moving, barking orders into his phone. "Get a team to St. Luke's Hospice now. Lock it down. No one in or out without my authorization." He turned back to her. "You're coming with me." "What? No. I need to go to her. If they're watching you, Stepping outside is exactly what they want. He was already leading her through a back hallway, lined with steel doors and security panels. Trust me, it's safer this way. His grip on her wrist was firm but protective, his pace relentless. Guards followed them down a hidden stairwell that led to an underground garage. Ava tried to catch her breath. You can't just... I can, he cut in. And I am. The car waiting for them was sleek and black, its tinted windows reflecting the cold gray sky. Adrian opened the passenger door. Get in. Ava hesitated. She didn't trust him, not really, but every instinct told her that staying still was worse. She slid inside. As the car pulled away, the city blurred past in streaks of winter light and rain. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ava said softly, If my grandmother is really connected to your family, what happens to her now? Adrian's jaw tightened. She'll be protected. You both will. By people who make others disappear? That earned her a small, humorless smile. You're not wrong, he said, but some people deserve to disappear. Silence settled again, thick and heavy. Ava stared out the window, the truth pressing down like a storm. She'd gone from waitress to wanted name in less than 24 hours, and sitting beside the man who controlled half the city's underworld, she couldn't tell if she was being saved or claimed. They reached the Cavallaro Medical Compound, a private facility on the edge of the river. Security was tight, every guard armed. Adrian guided her inside, his hand steady on her back. Through the glass doors of a private room, Ava saw her grandmother, safe, asleep, a nurse adjusting her blanket. Relief flooded through her like oxygen. Adrian's voice broke through the moment. She'll stay here until we handle this. Ava turned to him, tears in her eyes. Handle it how? By fighting them? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked closer, lowering his voice. My father has been trying to unite what's left of our old alliances for years. But your bloodline, your grandmother's, it's the missing piece. The families still respect the Ferraro name. If they see that connection restored, it could stop the Rizzi's power grab before it begins. You want me to pretend I'm part of your family? Ava asked, stunned. Not pretend, Adrian said quietly. Accept that you are. Ava stepped back, shaking her head. I'm not one of you. I grew up working 2 jobs. Eating cereal for dinner, praying my rent check wouldn't bounce. I'm not built for your world. Adrian's eyes softened for the first time. Neither was my mother, he said. But the world doesn't care what we're built for. It only cares what we do when it finds us. His words hung in the air, heavy but honest. Ava looked through the glass at her grandmother, peaceful, unaware of the storm forming around her. She exhaled shakily. If I stay, if I help you, will it keep her safe? Yes. Then I'll stay. That was how it began, not with a choice, but with a promise. Ava Carter stepped into a world where bloodlines meant more than birth certificates, and love could be both shield and weapon. And somewhere deep down, she already knew. Once you walk into the Cavallaro world, you don't walk out the same. Sometimes fate doesn't knock. It just opens the door and waits to see if you'll step through. Would you walk into danger if it meant protecting the person you love most? Tell me what you'd do. Because Ava just said yes, and her whole world is about to change. The first night at the Cavallaro compound felt like falling asleep inside a secret. The windows were bulletproof, the walls thick enough to drown out the world. Even the air smelled expensive, a mix of leather, cedar, and the faint sweetness of the garden outside. Ava lay awake on the massive guest room bed, listening to the quiet hum of the city beyond the river. Everything she'd known just 24 hours ago, her job, her apartment, her predictable little life, felt like it belonged to someone else. Down the hall, armed guards moved in steady patterns. Somewhere, Adrian was probably pacing another room, calculating, planning. She turned over, staring at the ceiling. I should be terrified, she whispered into the darkness. So why does it feel like I've stepped into something I was meant to see? Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was destiny. Or maybe it was that strange certainty that sometimes whispers through chaos. The feeling that the pieces of your life were always meant to click in this exact, impossible way. Have you ever felt that? That eerie sense that life's coincidences aren't accidents at all? That maybe the mess is leading you somewhere? Ava didn't have an answer, but the question refused to leave her mind. Morning came gray and slow. When Ava stepped into the dining room, Adrian was already there, a black shirt rolled at the sleeves, coffee steaming beside a stack of papers. He looked like a man born to own silence. He glanced up when she entered. "You didn't sleep." "Is that a statement or a question?" she asked, trying for steady. "A guess," he said, almost smiling. "You're too aware of your surroundings. People don't sleep when they're afraid." "I'm not afraid," she lied. He lifted one eyebrow. "You should be. Fear keeps you alive." "Or paralyzed," she countered, sliding into the chair across from him. That earned a faint glimmer in his eyes, the closest thing to amusement she'd seen. "You sound like my mother." "She must have been smart," Ava said. He nodded once. She was. A pause lingered. Not awkward, just heavy with things unsaid. Then he reached into the folder again and slid a photo across the table. It showed an old, hand-stitched flag bearing a crest, a golden ship encircled by olive branches. "The Ferraro seal," he said. "Your grandmother's family used it on their shipping crates in Palermo before the war. My father has one of those crates locked in his archives." Ava traced the image with her finger. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to know what you're part of." He stood, motioning for her to follow. They passed through hallways lined with framed black and white photos, men in suits, ships in harbors, women with fierce eyes that reminded Ava uncomfortably of her grandmother. Adrian stopped before a steel door secured by a keypad. He entered a code and the lock released with a soft click. Inside was an archive, a vault of history. Wooden shelves, dusty ledgers, and boxes labeled in looping Italian handwriting. "This," he said quietly, "is what the Ferraros and Cavallaros built together. The trade routes, the import rights, the shipping records, but there's something missing." He pointed toward an empty space on the shelf. "The Ferraro ledger, the one that mapped the hidden routes between Sicily and Chicago. It vanished the same year your grandmother left Italy." Ava frowned. "You think she took it?" "I think she protected it," Adrian said. "That book isn't just numbers. It's power. Roots, codes, and debts that still matter." She shook her head. "She never talked about any of this. Just recipes, family stories. Nothing that sounded like crime." Adrian turned toward her. "Sometimes stories are safer than truth." His gaze softened, the steel in his tone giving way to something quieter. "I'm not asking you to believe everything today. I'm asking you to remember. You said she taught you the old language. Did she ever make you repeat phrases you didn't understand?" Ava searched her memory. The smell of garlic and olive oil, the sound of her grandmother humming over a simmering pot, words murmured between recipes. She used to say, "La verità non muore mai." Adrian's eyes lifted. "The truth never dies." He smiled slightly. "That's the Ferraro motto." The room seemed to tilt around her. All those nights she'd thought were just stories. They were warnings, lessons. Adrian stepped closer, his voice lower now. "Someone taught you more than words, Ava. She left you keys. You just haven't realized what they open yet." A chill slid down her spine. He reached past her to a shelf and drew out a small wooden box. When he opened it, inside lay a delicate gold medallion, etched with the same crest from the photo. "My father kept this," he said. "He thought the Ferraro line was gone forever. When he saw you, he said, 'The blood has found its way home.'" Ava stared at the medallion, the edges glinting like memory. "So what happens now?" Adrian hesitated, then said quietly, "Now, you become visible." By late afternoon, the house was alive with movement. Security briefings, phone calls, hushed Italian arguments echoing down the halls. Ava kept to the library, pretending to read while her heart chased its own thoughts. Visible. She'd spent her whole life trying to stay unseen. And now, an entire world she didn't ask for was looking right at her. When Adrian found her hours later, she was staring out the window at the river. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply handed her a cup of coffee and leaned against the frame beside her. "My father's holding a meeting tonight," he said. "The heads of 3 allied families will be there. He wants you to attend." "Me? Why?" "Because they need to see you're real, that the Ferraro line still breathes." Ava let out a shaky laugh. You make it sound like I'm some kind of relic. Not a relic, he said softly. A reminder. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the rest of the world blurred away. The guards, the threats, the power games. There was just the quiet pull of two people standing on the edge of something neither of them could name. Ava looked down at the steam rising from her cup. You really believe all this fate and bloodline stuff? Adrian's voice lowered. I believe in choices, but sometimes fate gives us the same lesson over and over until we finally learn it. Her chest tightened. And what's the lesson this time? He looked at her then, the faintest trace of warmth breaking through his guarded calm. That maybe the past isn't trying to trap us. Maybe it's trying to heal us. Night fell quickly. The Cavallaro estate glowed like a lighthouse over the river, its windows golden against the dark. Inside, the long dining hall had been transformed. Candles, heavy curtains, silver gleaming under chandelier light. Ava entered beside Adrian, her heart thudding as dozens of eyes turned her way. Don Enzo sat at the head of the table, proud and still, his cane resting against the chair. This, he announced in Italian, is Ava Carter, granddaughter of Celeste Ferraro and blood of Palermo. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some approving, some suspicious. Ava forced herself to stand tall. Every instinct screamed to run, but she could almost hear her grandmother's voice again. You were never meant to hide, my girl. Dinner passed in slow waves of questions, toasts, and coded conversations. Ava spoke when spoken to, smiled when expected, and watched as Adrian subtly redirected every threat disguised as politeness. By the end of the night, she understood one thing clearly. The Cavallaros didn't invite her here for sentiment. They invited her because power respected her name. When the last guest had gone and silence returned, Ava finally turned to Adrian. That was exhausting, he nodded. You did well. What does your father think? That you may have saved us. She blinked. Saved you? Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper. You gave the old families hope that peace is still possible, and that terrifies the Rizzies. Ava leaned back against the marble column, her exhaustion mingling with disbelief. Peace? In your world? That's just a temporary word, isn't it? He didn't answer, not with words, just a look, quiet, searching, almost tender. In that silence, Ava realized something unsettling. The danger around her wasn't the only thing drawing her in. It was him. The contradictions. The loneliness behind his control. Maybe she should have been afraid of that too. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Soft, unhurried, covering the city in temporary mercy. Ava pressed her palm against the cold glass. Everything feels different now, she whispered. Adrian stood beside her. Because it is, she exhaled slowly. I don't know who I'm supposed to be in this story. His gaze followed the drifting flakes. Maybe that's the point, he said. You get to decide. And somewhere deep inside, Ava knew. That choice would change more than her life. It might change all of theirs. Sometimes the world doesn't ask who you are. It shows you. Ava wasn't sure if that thought belonged to her or her grandmother's memory, but it stayed. Have you ever stood in a moment that demanded you become someone new? Not because you wanted to, but because life refused to let you stay the same? If you have, you already understand the path Ava was stepping onto, one that leads straight into the heart of the Cavallaro Empire and into Adrian's guarded soul. Snow painted the night in silence. By morning, the city looked calm, like the world had pressed pause. But inside the Cavallaro estate, calm didn't exist. It only dressed itself up as order. Ava woke to the sound of raised voices, sharp, urgent, Italian cutting through the air like glass. She slipped out of bed, still wearing one of the cotton shirts Rosa, the housekeeper, had left for her, and moved toward the hall. The voices grew clearer near the study. Adrian's tone, cold, precise, another man's, defensive, cracking. Ava froze in the doorway. You were supposed to monitor the transfers, not alter them, Adrian said, his voice low and deadly. Do you realize what you've done? The other man, slick-haired, wearing a navy suit too perfect for early morning, swallowed hard. It was just a test transaction. I didn't know the Rizzies would intercept it. They always intercept weakness, Adrian snapped. That's their game. The man, Carlo, she remembered someone calling him, rubbed his forehead. We can fix it. Adrian leaned closer, and even from the doorway, Ava could feel the tension radiate from him. There's no fixing betrayal, only consequences. Ava stepped back, heart racing. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the word betrayal anchored her in place. Then, for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw Adrian lose control. His hand slammed against the desk, rattling the crystal decanter. We're bleeding from the inside, Carlo. My father thinks the Ferraro connection has stabilized things. But someone's feeding the Rizzi's intel. Someone close. Ava's chest tightened. Carlo's voice trembled. You think it's me? I think whoever it is just put a target on Ava Carter's back. Her name hit the air like a gunshot. Ava turned before they saw her and hurried down the corridor, her pulse echoing in her ears. Later that day, the mansion seemed quieter, but that silence had weight, like everyone inside knew something was wrong. Rosa found Ava in the sunroom, pretending to read. The older woman's eyes were warm but sharp, like she saw through excuses. You heard something, didn't you? She asked softly. Ava looked up. Is it that obvious? Rosa smiled sadly. In this house, it's safer to pretend you didn't. I can't do that, Ava said. Adrian said someone inside betrayed them, and that it put me in danger. Rosa hesitated, then sat beside her. Danger has always been part of the Cavallaro story, but you are different. You make them feel things they've forgotten. Guilt, loyalty, hope. That scares people. Ava frowned. You sound like you're saying it's my fault. Rosa shook her head. No, child, but sometimes light attracts shadows. Those words stuck with her for the rest of the day. Shadows, guilt, hope, each circling her thoughts like crows. That evening, Adrian appeared at her door. No warning, no smile. His eyes were darker than usual, something unreadable brewing behind them. We need to talk. Ava crossed her arms. About your little argument this morning? His jaw tightened. So you did hear. I didn't mean to, she said. But when someone says my name like it's a problem, it's hard not to notice. Adrian exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. Someone inside is selling information. Codes, shipments, names. The Rizzies knew about your grandmother's transfer before even my father did. Ava's breath caught. What does that mean? It means they've infiltrated deeper than we thought. And whoever it is, they know everything about you now. The words felt heavy, not like a threat, but like a truth she couldn't undo. So, what happens now? She asked quietly. Adrian looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a moment, his voice softened. Now I protect you. Ava shook her head. You can't protect me from something you can't see. His hand brushed hers. A rare, unguarded gesture. Then I'll find who it is, and when I do... His voice dropped to a whisper. They'll regret touching what's mine. Ava froze at the word mine. She wanted to tell herself he didn't mean it, that it was just his protective instinct, but the way he said it made her pulse stumble. She pulled her hand back slowly. You don't own me, Adrian. His gaze didn't waver. No, he said, but I'm starting to think I'm losing the choice not to care. Later that night, the snow outside turned to rain, soft, persistent, the kind that blurs the city into watercolors. Ava couldn't sleep. She wandered down the hall toward the kitchen, craving quiet. But as she reached the staircase, she heard a voice, hushed, urgent, and familiar. Carlo. He stood in the foyer, phone pressed to his ear, his back half turned to her. His voice was low, but the words still carried. Not yet. He suspects, but I'm close. Once I have the ledger, the girl won't matter. Ava's blood ran cold. She stepped back too quickly, her foot brushing the corner of a rug. The soft scrape echoed. Carlo turned sharply. Who's there? Ava didn't think. She ran. Through the hallway. Past the portraits and chandeliers, her heartbeat thundering like drums. She darted into the nearest room, Adrian's study, and pressed her back against the door. Moments later, she heard footsteps outside, then silence. Her hands shook as she clutched her phone, debating whether to call for help. But before she could decide, the door handle turned. "Ava!" She jumped. Adrian stood there, shirt half unbuttoned, worry flickering across his face. "What happened?" he asked. She caught her breath. "It's Carlo. He's talking to them. The Rizzies. He said he's going to take something called the ledger and—" Adrian's expression hardened instantly. "Stay here." He disappeared into the hall before she could stop him. The sound of his footsteps pounded down the corridor, followed by the sharp echo of raised voices. Then the heavy thud of a door slammed open. Ava waited, trembling. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, Adrian returned. His shirt was blood-stained near the collar. "Adrian." He held up a hand. "Not mine." His voice was flat. "Carlo's gone." Her stomach twisted. "Gone?" "He ran before I could stop him. But he won't get far." Ava stared at him. This man who could shift from protector to predator in a heartbeat. "What happens when you find him?" Adrian's eyes met hers. "Justice." "And what does that mean in your world?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. Hours later, Ava sat by the window again, watching rain streak down the glass. Somewhere, Carlo was running. Somewhere, the Rizzies were waiting. And somewhere inside this house, Adrian Cavallaro was deciding how far he'd go to protect her. She thought of his hand brushing hers. His voice when he said mine. He wasn't just dangerous because of what he did. He was dangerous because of how he made her feel. That terrified her more than the Rizzies ever could. And yet deep down, something warmer stirred beneath the fear. A truth she didn't want to name. Because maybe it wasn't just him crossing lines anymore. Maybe she was too. The rain kept falling, and Ava whispered to herself, "I can't tell if I'm surviving this or becoming part of it." Have you ever felt that? When doing what's necessary starts to look a little too much like becoming what you swore you'd never be? That's where Ava stood now, between survival and surrender, between truth and the dangerous pull of someone she couldn't walk away from. And the storm outside was only the beginning. Rain softened to mist by morning, but inside the Cavallaro estate, the tension only thickened. Ava hadn't slept. The words replayed over and over. Carlo's gone. The ledger. The girl won't matter. She watched dawn stretch across the river, pale light creeping between clouds like a secret trying to escape. Every drop sliding down the window looked like time running out. Adrian had been gone since before sunrise. She could still smell the trace of his cologne near the study door, faint and haunting. Rosa appeared with a tray of tea. The older woman looked tired too. "He's meeting his father," she said softly. "There are consequences to betrayal in this family." Ava's stomach turned. "You mean they're going to kill him?" Rosa's silence was its own answer. By noon, the house buzzed with unease. Guards moved faster. Conversations dropped to whispers whenever Ava entered a room. It was as if she'd suddenly become the center of gravity in a world built on secrets, a world that didn't know what to do with her presence. She found herself in the library again, pretending to read, her mind chasing the same impossible question. Was she saving herself by staying here, or losing herself piece by piece? The fireplace crackled, and she spoke aloud just to fill the silence. "Grandma always said we can't fix darkness by living in it. But what if you don't have a choice?" The words lingered in the empty room, echoing back as her own reflection in the window asked the question she didn't dare finish aloud. The door opened quietly. Adrian stepped inside. He looked worn, his shirt still damp from the rain. Shadows carved new lines across his face. "It's done," he said. Ava set her book down carefully. "What does that mean?" "Carlo won't be hurting anyone again." Her pulse spiked. You killed him." Adrian's gaze flicked away. "He made his choice." Ava's breath caught. "And what does that make you?" He met her eyes, cold steel against trembling glass. "It makes me the reason you're still alive." Silence hung heavy between them. "I didn't ask you to do that," she whispered. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't. But you also didn't ask to be hunted, Ava. My world doesn't grant wishes. It takes what it wants and protects what it needs." She stared at him, this man who scared her and somehow made her feel safe in the same breath. "And what do you need, Adrian?" He hesitated. Just for a heartbeat, the mask slipped. I need this not to destroy you. Then he left. That evening, Ava sat in her grandmother's hospital room inside the compound. The machines beeped softly, steady, alive. She took her grandmother's frail hand, tracing the wrinkles with her thumb. You knew, didn't you? Ava whispered. You knew about all of this and you didn't tell me. Her grandmother's eyes fluttered open, weak but clear. I knew the Cavalleros would find us one day, she murmured, but I prayed it would be a day of peace, not war. Why didn't you warn me? Because, my darling, warning you would have kept you from walking into your own truth. Ava shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. Your truth got people killed. The older woman's voice softened. Sometimes love costs us things we can't afford. I loved your grandfather. I loved a man who wasn't meant for me, and I ran. But you can't run forever from what you're born from, she squeezed Ava's hand. Promise me you'll be careful with him. With Adrian? Her grandmother nodded. He carries too many ghosts. Men like that don't fall in love, Ava. They surrender to it, and that's more dangerous. Before Ava could respond, the door burst open. A guard, pale and breathless. Miss Carter, we need you to come with us. Now. Her heart lurched. What happened? Security breach, the guard said. We think the Rizzies have found this location. Ava stood instantly. My grandmother, she's being moved. We'll keep her safe. But she knew. Safety was a word the Cavalleros used when they meant prepare for the worst. Minutes later, alarms blared through the compound. The polished calm of the estate turned to chaos. Guards shouting orders, vehicles revving in the courtyard. Adrian met her in the hallway, already loading a handgun. You're going with me, he said, grabbing her arm. Where's my grandmother? Transport team's taking her to a backup site. I'm not leaving without her. Adrian spun to face her, eyes blazing. You don't have a choice. They're coming for you, Ava. She froze. Me? He nodded sharply. Carlo didn't just sell information, he gave them the Ferraro documents. Names, bloodlines, inheritance records. You're the prize now. He shoved a small silver pendant into her hand, the Ferraro crest etched in gold. Wear this. If anything happens, show this to my men. They'll know you're protected. Ava clutched it tightly, the metal warm from his palm. What about you? He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides 1,000 things behind it. I'm not the one they'll shoot first. Gunfire cracked outside, sharp and sudden. Adrian's men moved into position, shouting. He turned to her one last time. Stay behind me. They moved fast, down staircases, through hidden corridors. Ava's pulse raced, her breath catching as the world tilted between light and shadow. A bullet shattered a window ahead, spraying glass. Adrian's arm shot out, pulling her down, his body shielding hers. The floor trembled under the weight of another explosion outside. Her hands pressed against his chest, solid, real, alive. Are you hit? She gasped. No! He looked down at her, their faces inches apart. But you almost were. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Chaos screaming around them while something deeper, quieter passed between their eyes. Then he pushed her forward. Go! They burst into a hidden garage beneath the property. A black SUV waited, engine running. Adrian motioned for her to get in. We'll regroup downtown. I have another safe house. But before he could close her door, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze, his face drained of color. What is it? Ava asked, fear crawling up her spine. He didn't answer, just turned the phone for her to see. A photo. Her grandmother, bound, terrified, in a dim warehouse. Ava's breath broke into a sob. No. A message below the image read, Trade the girl for the old woman. Midnight, Pier 14. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely speak. We have to go. Now. Adrian's voice was low, tight. If we go now, we walk into their trap. They'll kill you both. I don't care. She's all I have left. He met her eyes, pain and fury flashing behind his restraint. And if I lose you, I lose everything we fought for. Ava stared at him. Everything you fought for? Or everything you want to own? His silence said more than words. Tears blurred her vision. You think this is about power. It's not. It's about family. It's about love. She stepped closer, trembling but firm. You can play God with your enemies, Adrian, but not with my heart. Then she turned away. By the time midnight arrived, Ava was gone. She'd slipped out during the chaos, Rose's car keys clutched tight. She didn't know how to fight the Rizzies, didn't know how to navigate their world, but she knew how to love someone enough to risk everything for them. And sometimes, that was enough. The reflection of the city lights danced across her windshield as she whispered to herself, "Grandma, hold on. I'm coming." In her pocket, the silver Ferraro pendant burned warm against her skin, the only piece of Adrian she allowed herself to keep. Sometimes, loving the wrong person isn't the mistake. It's believing love can't exist in the dark. Ava wasn't sure if she was running toward salvation or her own destruction, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let the story end with someone else's choices. Have you ever reached that point where love, anger, and courage blur until you can't tell them apart anymore? That's where Ava stood now, on the edge of a night that could take everything she had left. The road stretched out in ribbons of rain and fear. Ava's hands gripped the steering wheel tight, her knuckles pale in the dim glow of the dashboard. Each drop on the windshield felt like a countdown, every flash of lightning a warning that she was heading somewhere she shouldn't. And somewhere she had to. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and gold. Signs, lights, empty streets. She drove like someone running on memory more than map, her heart navigating what logic never could. When she reached Pier 14, the air smelled like rust, salt, and secrets. Waves slapped against the docks, black water swallowing the reflection of distant streetlights. She parked behind a stack of shipping containers, cut the engine, and sat in silence. Her breath came in shallow pulls. The pendant in her hand glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, the Ferraro crest gleaming like a heartbeat she could almost hear. "Grandma," she whispered into the dark, "please hold on." She didn't have a plan, just instincts and love sharpened by desperation. Moving quietly between containers, she scanned for movement. Her grandmother's photo replayed in her mind. The ropes, the fear. The Rizzies wanted an exchange, but Ava knew enough now to understand there would be no trade. They wanted to end the Ferraro line, and her. A shadow shifted near the far edge of the pier, voices, low, male, impatient. "She won't come alone," one said in Italian. "Cavallaro's too proud." Ava crouched lower, her pulse drumming in her ears. "I told you," another voice hissed. "Once we have the girl, Cavallaro loses his leverage. The old woman's just bait." Her body trembled, from fear, from anger, from love refusing to die quietly. She crept closer, ducking behind a forklift. The scene came into view. Her grandmother, bound to a chair, a gag across her mouth, 2 men guarding her. Ava's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to charge in, but something stopped her. The pendant, the crest. She held it up, the etching glinting faintly. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind like an old lullaby. "La verità non muore mai." The truth never dies. And that was when she saw it. The pattern carved along the pendant's edge wasn't decoration. It was a code, numbers, coordinates. Her breath caught. She pulled out her phone, entering the numbers into her map. A blinking dot appeared, a warehouse 2 blocks from the pier. The Ferraro ledger. It wasn't lost, it was hidden. And suddenly, everything clicked. Why Adrian's father wanted her visible, why the Rizzies wanted her captured. Why her grandmother had kept silent all these years. It wasn't about bloodlines, it was about truth, buried in a ledger that could expose decades of crime, corruption, and betrayal on both sides. Ava exhaled shakily. This was her grandmother's real legacy, not guilt, but redemption. She started to move again, but then headlights flared in the distance. Black SUVs pulling up along the pier. Doors slammed. Adrian. He was out of the car before it stopped, gun drawn, coat billowing in the wind like a shadow with a heartbeat. "Of course he came," Ava whispered. "He always comes when it's too late." The Rizzies raised their weapons. Adrian raised his. Chaos exploded like thunder. Bullets tore through the air. Metal screamed. Waves splashed red beneath the flickering pier lights. Ava ducked, sprinting toward the container line. "Adrian!" she shouted. He turned at the sound, his eyes finding hers for a split second. Shock, anger, fear, all at once. "You shouldn't be here," he yelled. "Neither should you," she shot back. A blast ripped through a fuel drum nearby, sending both of them diving for cover. When Ava looked up again, one of the Rizzies had grabbed her grandmother's chair, dragging it toward the edge of the dock. "No!" she screamed, bolting forward. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just ran. Into gunfire, into madness, into love. She reached her grandmother as the man raised his weapon. She swung a loose iron bar from the ground, striking his arm hard. The gun skidded away, splashing into the water. The man cursed, lunging for her. But before he could reach her, a gunshot split the night. The Rizzy dropped, a crimson bloom spreading across his shoulder. Adrian stood behind him, chest heaving, eyes fierce and unrelenting. He rushed to Ava, grabbed her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "You came," he half smiled. "You sound surprised." "I left you, and I followed," he said simply. "You think I'd let you face the end of this alone?" They freed her grandmother, moving fast as sirens wailed in the distance. Ava turned to him, clutching the pendant. "The ledger isn't gone. It's hidden. I know where." Adrian's eyes widened. "Where?" She held up the pendant. "This crest. It's not just a family mark. It's a map." He looked at her like she was the only light left in the storm. "You really are Ferraro blood." She shook her head. "No, Adrian. I'm just someone who's tired of letting the past decide who we get to be." They escaped into the rain-soaked streets, the sound of sirens fading behind them. Adrian's hand found hers as they ran, and for once, she didn't pull away. In the silence between gunfire and sirens, there was something sacred, the raw, trembling understanding that this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about becoming. Becoming the woman her grandmother believed in. Becoming the man Adrian could have been if he hadn't inherited violence. Becoming more than the blood, the lies, and the war. They stopped beneath an overpass, drenched and gasping. Ava turned to him. "You said once that fear keeps you alive?" He nodded. "It does." She smiled faintly through the tears. "Then I guess I've never felt more alive." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, hesitant, reverent. "You scare me, Ava Carter." "Good," she whispered. "Now you know how I feel." And then, for the first time, he kissed her, not out of impulse or control, but surrender. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't perfect, it was real. Two broken worlds colliding and somehow fitting. When they finally pulled apart, the rain had softened to mist again. Adrian exhaled. "We find the ledger. We end this. No more running. No more ghosts." Ava nodded, her eyes steady. "We don't end it for them, Adrian. We end it for us." And in that moment she understood. Power didn't live in names or legacies. It lived in choice, the courage to rewrite the story. Maybe that was what her grandmother had wanted all along. Sometimes life brings you to the edge not to break you, but to show you who you really are. Ava finally knew who she was now. Not the waitress who stumbled into the wrong world, not the pawn between families, but a woman who could stand between danger and love and not flinch. And maybe that's something we all face at some point. A storm that demands we stop waiting for rescue and start rescuing ourselves. If you were standing where Ava is now, would you run or would you fight to reclaim your story? The rain eased, dawn crawling up behind the clouds. In the distance, the first light touched the river, gold, fragile, new. Ava and Adrian stood side by side, soaked and silent, two worlds colliding under one sky. And for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She felt found. The first light of dawn had barely touched the skyline when the storm rolled back in. Ava sat in the passenger seat of Adrian's car, the pendant still clutched in her hand like a compass to destiny. The map on her phone pulsed with the coordinates the pendant had revealed. Warehouse 39, along the southern docks. Old, condemned, forgotten. The kind of place where history went to rot. Adrian drove fast, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near the pistol on his thigh. His eyes, dark from a night without sleep, flicked between the road and her face. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Ava said softly. But running hasn't worked so far. He gave a faint nod. Then we stopped running. When they reached the docks, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air smelled of salt and rust. Seagulls circled lazily above the broken cranes. Adrian killed the engine. Stay close to me. Ava stepped out, boots crunching against gravel. The warehouse loomed ahead, massive, silent, its metal sides streaked with decades of rain. She held up the pendant and sunlight caught its edge. The reflection bounced against the steel door, revealing a hidden outline, a crest-shaped indentation almost invisible to the eye. Ava fit the pendant into the groove and turned. A soft click. The lock released. Inside smelled of dust and forgotten paper. Rows of crates lined the walls. Sheets of plastic fluttered like ghosts in the draft. Adrian flicked on a flashlight. If the ledger's here, it'll be in the office upstairs. They moved quietly, the beam slicing through shadows. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a heartbeat too loud. Halfway up the stairs, Adrian froze. Someone's here, Ava followed his gaze. Down below, in the dim light near the entrance, a silhouette. Cane, suit, authority, Don Enzo Cavallaro. Adrian! The old man's voice rolled through the space, low and calm. You should have come to me. Instead, you run off with the girl. The Rizzies are bleeding, but you? You're tearing our name apart. Adrian's jaw tightened. I came for the truth, Papa. Enzo's cane tapped once on the floor. Truth is for poets. Power is for men who survive. Ava stepped forward. Then why hide the ledger? Enzo's eyes turned to her, sharp as a blade. Ah, the Ferraro blood. Your grandmother played her part well, pretending to be innocent while she helped destroy our alliances. That book holds evidence of every betrayal. Hers, mine, Adrian's. Adrian frowned. What do you mean, mine? The old man sighed. You think you're cleaner than me, Figlio? Every deal you made to keep her safe. Every secret favor to the police to stall the Rizzies. The moment you fell in love with her, you became weak. The word love hit the air like thunder. Ava felt it twist inside her, not because it wasn't true, but because Enzo said it like it was poison. Adrian stepped forward. If loving her makes me weak, then maybe you've never understood strength. Enzo's voice hardened. Strength is sacrifice. I killed my own brother to protect this family. Can you say the same? Adrian raised his weapon. I'm done killing for ghosts. Before Enzo could respond, movement erupted on the upper balcony. Men in black emerging from the shadows, guns drawn. Adrian shoved Ava behind a crate as bullets ripped through the air. Glass shattered, metal screamed. Go! He shouted. Find the ledger! Ava crawled toward the office stairs, ducking low. The air filled with smoke and gunpowder. Inside the office, a desk stood covered in dust and papers. She scanned desperately. Ledgers, files, crates, until she found it. A leather-bound book stamped with the Ferraro crest. She opened it, pages filled with columns of numbers and names, shipping routes, payments, and under each entry, initials. C-R-E. Her pulse hammered. One set of initials caught her eye. E.C. Enzo Cavallaro. The old man wasn't just preserving power. He'd been selling routes to the Rizzies for years, keeping the war alive so no one could ever unite the families without him. She grabbed the book and ran back down the stairs. Adrian! He turned as she slid the ledger across the floor to him. He's been the leak, Adrian! Your father's the one who fed the Rizzies! Enzo's gun lifted slowly. You shouldn't have seen that girl! Don't! Adrian said, voice cracking with fury. She's telling the truth! I am the truth, Enzo spat. Without me, this family collapses. No, Adrian said quietly. Without love, it already has. He fired. The echo thundered through the warehouse. When the smoke cleared, Enzo's cane clattered to the floor. The old man staggered, eyes wide, and sank slowly against the wall. Adrian dropped the gun, his breath ragged. Ava ran to him, her hands trembling. Adrian, what did you do? He stared at the floor. What he made me promise I'd never do. End what he started. For a long moment, there was only silence. The kind that follows after generations of noise finally stop. Ava knelt beside him, placing a hand over his. You didn't end it, Adrian. You freed it. He looked up, his eyes glassy but alive. The families will come for me. Then we give them something stronger than revenge, she said. We give them truth. She held up the ledger. Let the world see what's in here. Every lie, every name. Let the truth rebuild what fear destroyed. Adrian hesitated, then nodded slowly. If we do this, there's no going back. Good, she whispered. Because I'm done looking back. They left the warehouse together, dawn breaking in streaks of gold and gray. Police sirens echoed in the distance. Somewhere behind them, the Cavallaro Empire was burning, and in its ashes, something new was waiting to grow. Adrian turned to her as they reached the car. Do you think the world forgives people like us? Ava smiled faintly. Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe it's about choosing what kind of people we want to be next. He studied her, then reached out, brushing his thumb against her cheek. You always talk like you already know the ending. She shook her head. I just know we're not done writing it. Sometimes life breaks you open so the light can find a way in. Standing there in the morning haze, Ava realized the truth wasn't just in the ledger. It was in the choice to live honestly, even when it hurt. Because truth was the only weapon strong enough to heal what generations had destroyed. And maybe that's something worth asking ourselves too. Would you rather live a comfortable lie or face a painful truth that sets you free? They drove away from the docks as sunlight spilled over the city, washing away the last of the storm. Ava leaned back, eyes closed, feeling the warmth of it on her skin. Beside her, Adrian reached over, threading his fingers through hers. Whatever comes next, he said quietly, we face it together. She smiled. That's the only way I'd want it. The past was still there, in the scars, in the silence, but it no longer owned them. The story wasn't ending. It was beginning again, with truth. The city looked different in the morning light. Smoke curled into the horizon where the docks once stood, rising like the last breath of an old world that had finally run its course. Ava sat quietly beside Adrian as the car sped north, past the outskirts and into the wide-open silence of the highway. For the first time in days, no one was chasing them. No guns, no deals, no more ghosts waiting in the shadows. Just the road, endless, unfamiliar, alive. Adrian's hands stayed steady on the wheel, but his eyes were distant. The kind of distant that comes after losing something you'd spent your whole life protecting, even when you didn't know why. Ava rested her head against the window, watching the landscape shift from concrete to fields, from gray to green. The wind carried the faint smell of rain, clean and new. Where are we going? She asked softly. Adrian exhaled. Someplace quiet. The Cavallaro name will take time to fade. Until then, we disappear. And after? He glanced at her, a faint shadow of a smile in his eyes. After, we live. 2 weeks later, they settled in a small coastal town 2 states away. The house wasn't grand, just 2 bedrooms and a view of the sea, but it was theirs. For the first time, Ava could open a window without fear that someone was watching. The sound of waves replaced the hum of danger. The scent of salt and wild rosemary filled the mornings. Adrian spent hours walking the shoreline, silent, sometimes skipping stones into the surf like he was teaching himself how to breathe again. Ava found peace in the simple things. Cooking, painting, planting herbs on the windowsill like her grandmother used to. But some nights, when the wind howled through the cliffs, the past still found its way in, not as fear, but as memory. She'd wake and see Adrian sitting at the table, reading the old Ferraro ledger, now sealed in a glass case. He wasn't protecting it anymore. He was studying it, tracing the signatures, the history, the proof that truth could survive even the dirtiest of bloodlines. One evening, she joined him, sliding a mug of tea across the table. You still reading that thing? She teased gently. He smiled faintly. It's strange. All my life I thought this book was the weight keeping us chained to violence. But maybe it's what frees us from it. Ava sat beside him, her eyes scanning the ink. You could publish it. Let the world know what really happened. I could, he said. But then it becomes another war. One of headlines and politics. Maybe some truths aren't meant to destroy. Maybe they're meant to teach. Ava leaned back, thinking about that. The idea that truth didn't always have to cut. Sometimes it could heal. The doorbell rang softly, a sound so normal it startled them both. Rosa stood outside, older, smiling, holding a brown paper bag and a bottle of wine. Ava's heart lifted. "Rosa! I told you I'd find you," the woman said warmly, stepping in. "The Cavallaro estate isn't what it was. Enzo's allies are gone. The families, they're talking peace now." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Peace? From them?" Rosa nodded. "You'd be surprised how tired men get when truth finally catches up to them." She turned to Ava, her smile softening. "And your grandmother, she's awake, recovering. She said to tell you that she's proud, that you broke the curse." Tears gathered in Ava's eyes before she could stop them. She hugged Rosa tightly. "Tell her I love her," Ava whispered, "and that I finally understand." Later that night, after Rosa left, Adrian and Ava walked along the beach under a sky full of stars. The tide rolled in gentle and steady, each wave erasing a little more of what came before. "She's proud of you," Adrian said quietly. "She should be proud of you, too." He shook his head. "I killed my father." "You ended what he started," she corrected softly. "That's not the same thing." He looked at her for a long moment. "Do you ever think we deserved a simpler story?" Ava smiled, tucking a curl behind her ear. "Maybe simplicity isn't the point. Maybe it's about surviving the hard stories and still choosing to love anyway." He laughed under his breath, that low, rare sound she'd grown to adore. "You always have the last word. Someone has to balance your dramatic exits." He laughed again, shaking his head, then quieter. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ava met his eyes, the moonlight catching the silver in them. "You didn't give me a choice. You kept showing up, angry, stubborn, alive." "Alive," he repeated softly, as if testing the word. "Yeah, that's new." The next morning, Ava wrote a letter to her grandmother, the kind of letter you don't send but keep folded between pages of an unfinished journal. "Dear Grandma, you were right. The truth never dies. It just waits for the right hands to carry it forward. I think I finally found what you wanted me to learn, that blood doesn't define us. Choices do. You taught me how to cook, how to love, how to see good in people even when they've forgotten it exists. And maybe, somehow, that's what saved him too. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of my name, not of my past, not even of love. Because love, the real kind, isn't about safety. It's about courage. And you raised me to be brave." She closed the notebook, a quiet peace filling her chest. Weeks turned into months. Tourists started coming back to the little town, filling the cafes with laughter. Ava found work in a small seaside restaurant. This time, not as a waitress hiding from life, but as someone living it. Sometimes Adrian would sit by the window reading while she worked, pretending not to watch her. But she always caught him. When their eyes met, he'd give that quiet half smile that said everything words couldn't. The kind of smile that meant, "We made it." One evening, near closing time, a young couple sat at one of her tables, arguing softly about love and forgiveness. Ava refilled their water glasses and smiled. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she said gently. "It just means you've decided your heart deserves peace." The woman blinked at her. "That's beautiful. Did you read that somewhere?" Ava smiled faintly. "Something like that." She glanced out the window, where Adrian waited under the dim porch light, hands in his pockets, patient as always. When she joined him outside, the night air was cool and calm. The stars shimmered above them like a promise. Adrian took her hand, brushing his thumb across the Ferraro pendant that still hung at her neck. "You never take it off," he said. "It reminds me of everything we survived," she whispered, "and everything we still could be." He nodded slowly. "You know, I used to think survival meant winning. Now I think it just means being able to stand in the quiet and breathe without fear." Ava smiled. "That's because you finally learned how to live. And you finally taught me how to love," he said. Then he kissed her. Not out of desperation or danger this time, but peace. Pure, simple peace. Life has a way of testing how much love and courage we carry, sometimes all at once. And maybe that's the question the universe keeps asking us in different ways. When everything you've known burns down, who do you become after the smoke clears? Ava Carter became someone who could stand in the ashes and still choose love. Adrian Cavallaro became a man who could face his own reflection and not see his father anymore. And together, they became a story that didn't end in tragedy, but in truth. The camera of life would pan out here, the waves breaking, the house on the hill glowing warm in the twilight, the laughter of two people who had finally stopped running. No gunfire, no fear, just the soft rhythm of the ocean and a future that finally felt like theirs, because the truth never dies. It only waits for someone brave enough to tell it. And maybe that's the question for you too. If you were given the chance to start over, free from fear, free from your past, what kind of story would you write for yourself? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.